getting started transitioning from design development into construction drawings. The sheets are just starting to get set up, and I've used a previous project as a template. So if I go to the sheet layers up here, I'm going to pan between the sheets that are associated with the 200s file. The 200s file usually includes the title sheet 000, a roof plan, foundation plan sheet 100, main level and upper level sheet 200, a framing plan sheet 201, and then like a 210 sheet for electrical lighting. So I'm going to go back and starting with the main level plan, we've already done some work on this one. If I double left click and then hit design layer, go into the dimensions design layer and hit OK, kind of takes me into the design layers. You can see here my active design layer is the dimension design layer. So also right now I'm going to make sure my layer options are set to the second from the bottom, show snap others, so that way I can snap items that are on my active design layer, but I can't snap to any of the other layers. I can't snap to the drawings underneath. I can't snap to the notes because they're on a different layer. That way I can only see what I have to work with. I've got it kind of laid out here, just the general task for the primary floor plan sheets. Exterior dimensions first, window keys, this is kind of the numbering system for the windows, door keys, a numbering system for the doors, and then interior dimensions. I usually do those keys first because they may ultimately be in the way, and once you have them in place it's easier to do interior dimensions. Building section cut lines, that usually may come a lot later in the process. Pertinent specific notes, that might be something I add later, or I already have some notes, built-in cabinetry just kind of from meeting with the client. So you'll notice in the classes, there's a couple classes that are turned off. The notes furniture, if I turn it back on, the furniture class, I've got that turned off. I have it on for design development, but I turn it off for the plan sheets because it's not related to the construction. I usually only have that on for the electrical lighting plan, so you can kind of see the notes there. So anyway, right now, kind of general working on dimensions. Again, in this situation, the dimensions have already been started or mostly finished on the exterior dimensions for the main level plan. But typically the dimensions, I use 3 classes. This one class, if I select it, you can see it's on the notes dashed class. So right here, notes dashed, notes centerline, and notes text are typically the only classes I use. Notes dashed, notes centerline, and then the dimension strings I usually do on the notes class text. So I pretty much always do face of stud. So face of stud, and then center of openings, and rather than doing center of walls, I tend to do just one side or the other. It really doesn't matter which side, one side or the other of walls. And with exterior dimensions, it's if the wall intersects the outside wall, you give it a dimension. If it's a wall that doesn't intersect the outside wall, it's caught by the interior dimensions. The way I like to do the dimension strings, there's basically 3 tiers. The outer tier, this is a good example, the outer tier is the overall dimensions. The inner tier, the next tier in, is just wall locations. So you can see there's only one wall that intersects the outside wall, so there's only 2. And then inside of that, the next tier catches the windows, but also catches those walls. So it kind of ties the windows to the walls and gets the most specific to the most broad. So when the framers are working, they could kind of like they could here you can look at the wall dimensions first and kind of lay out the walls, and then coordinate inside with the windows as well. So generally, like if this line is here, first I'll kind of make notes active, and then L for line, hold shift to kind of constrain, and once the line's been created, kind of just click and drag it into place, and stretch it around. That one was already in place. A lot of times, instead of actually going over here and say, put it on notes center line to draw the next line, a lot of times what I'll do is say notes dashed is my active class. I draw it, but then I realize, oh well, I need to change this into a center line. So while it's selected, I go over here, go down to notes center line. See, it has a dot since that's the active one, or that's what this class is. If I go to notes center line and left click, it'll transform that into the center line class. Once the guidelines are in place, once the guidelines are in place, I will usually make sure that notes text is active, and then I've got set up as D as a quick key. And basically what it does, if you go over here to the tool sets, these constrained linear dimension, you can see it has a quick key D associated with it. Unconstrained lines is when anything's at an angle, it's not a right angle, and I don't have a quick key for that. They're not used as frequently. So active class notes, if I hit D to initiate it and click and kind of pull it a little bit and then put it in place. A couple things to talk about when the dimension has been made. Let's see. The settings for the font size and the font type are related to what your font and your size is already set at before you initiate the tool. So like usually I'll kind of just click out. If I go to text, and I use this Trebuchet MS as primary font, and then select 9 point, then once those two have been selected, then the next thing I draw will be at that. It will be that font and it will be that size. So again, kind of D, click, drag, and then over here we have a lot of different attributes for that dimension string. You can see that it's on that class. You can see it's on the dimensions layer. I don't really ever mess with this plane settings. One thing I do change sometimes is this text offset. Right now it's set on 3. You can see the distance is offset here 3 inches. A lot of times if I need to squeeze things together a little tighter, like right here, I'll change that to, let's see, say I'll change it, instead of being 3, I might go over here and change that to 1, hit enter, and you can see it gets a little tighter. So I'll change that sometimes. Also, if you need to move it around, you can just kind of grab it and slide it. But sometimes if it's like that and you want to bring it back to default, you kind of, if you go to here and say auto position text, that kind of brings it back to the middle, which is the typical setting I like to put it on. So one thing, one example, like when I start laying out the dimensions, I'll create one, and what I typically do is hit Command D for duplicate, and then go down here and select the opposite one and kind of drag it on over, because this point's already there. If you can kind of just go down the line, duplicate, drag, duplicate, drag, and so on and so forth, and you can kind of go through them pretty quickly. There's several different ways you do it. You could select it, You can do M for mirror, and then use it about this line. You can mirror it, and then just adjust the end, kind of bring it back to that point. Here's a good example. I try not to get down to 1/8 inch dimensions so that the framers aren't talking trash about me in the field. In commercial work it's more common. In residential work it's kind of a joke. Usually 1/4 inch is about as fine a detail as you get, with rough framing especially. Cabinetry is another story. So for instance, this right now it's set on the tolerance so that it does show 1/8 of an inch, but if you go over here to the settings, precision, it's set on 1/8 of an inch precision. A lot of times I will force it to 1/4 inch precision. You can see it adjusted it, and so a lot of times I'll look around and go back through and check, and if I see some that came in at 1/8 inch scale, I'll force the precision setting to 1/4 inch. So that's the gist with dimensions. Take those extras away. One other little quick thing I was going to do is window keys. If you notice, I've got a reference set, a previous project. This has already kind of all been filled in. The notes, the keys are all even the notes are all filled in. It's copied 100 feet up above it. That's the Schultz-Ritzel project. So here, I'm gonna go and I want to borrow this. I can't select it right now, so if I hit right click, activate layer, I figure out that that's on the that is on the design layer. It's on the notes design layer instead of the dimensions. So I'm going to copy that and come down here and paste it just to kind of get started with the numbering system here. So it's not really an automated tool necessarily. It's just kind of a, what I do is I start on the front elevation, left side, and just kind of go counterclockwise around the building. That way on elevations I'll show these same keys and the numbers are left to right. They're in numerical order. So by starting here, I used to start at 100, but it's easier if you start at 101 because if you go up to like 113, that's 13 windows instead of saying, well, it's 14, or it's actually one additional window. So I've created it here, 101. That works. I'm gonna hit hold Option, drag to copy it over, and then I'll double click and just kind of come in here to modify it, make it 102. Hit Exit Group, and so basically just kind of pan around. One thing to be careful of is there is a transom here, so that is a window that needs to be counted as the next one in line. So don't forget transoms. They're separate from the window order, or separate from the door order. Similar to window keys, I'm going to go up to that reference plan again. Similar to the window keys, the door keys, it's a round symbol instead of this hexagonal symbol. So I'm going to copy paste that. Again, I'm on the design layer now for notes instead of the dimensions design layer. I'm going to copy that, bring it down. Similar, basically on the front elevation, the first door, usually the front door, is in this case, the windows of course are all exterior, but the doors are either interior or exterior. So what I typically do is the front door is almost always the very first door counted. I'm going to copy that, and what I typically do is I go into a room and then I go counterclockwise around that room until I hit another door. So this door here would be 102. This door would be 103. And continuing counterclockwise, this becomes 104. And so for example, this would be 105, this would be 106. If I keep going around, this would be 107. This would be 108. And at this point, I've finished that room, and now I'm going to go into this room and go around the room. So this would be 109, this would be 110, and you would just kind of follow around. If I get to a point where I've gone through all of these, then I'll come back around and say I missed this one and add it. So that covers the primary. So here I'm going to go back to the viewport on the 200 sheet. So the main level plan has had quite a bit of work already done on it. The upper level plan hasn't had any work. If I double click on the upper level plan, go to the dimensions, you can see the dimensions haven't been added here, but that reference plan is up above. What I will often do is if I go down to the main level dimensions, and actually it's a little bit dangerous to do this. Sometimes I might just kind of get a couple of dimension strings from the lower level, and then maybe a couple of guidelines, and then copy, and then go back to the upper level dimensions, and then I'm going to do a paste in place, which is Option Command V, paste in place. So now I've got kind of some base information to that's exactly lined up with what's below it. So now if I go back to the viewport, you can see those outer dimension strings are lined up with these outer dimension strings, so that I know my boundaries to kind of keep it in the viewport. That's probably about enough for now.